Hello and welcome to Napflix. Tonight, we are going to explore 100 fascinating facts about human nature. So settle in, relax, and let your mind wander as we journey through the most incredible and soothing details about human nature. There is a Russian writer who spent 4 years in a Siberian prison camp, surrounded by cold and suffering and despair, and came out of it believing that the pain had been the most important thing that had ever happened to him. Fyodor Dostoevsky did not see suffering as something to be avoided. He believed it was the only genuine road toward understanding what it meant to be human. He wrote about this again and again, placing his characters into the deepest possible darkness and watching what happened to their souls. Modern psychology has arrived at something remarkably similar. Researchers studying people who survive serious illness, loss, trauma, and catastrophe have documented a phenomenon called post-traumatic growth, in which individuals report coming out of devastating experiences with a deeper appreciation for life, stronger relationships, and a clearer sense of purpose. Dostoevsky would not have been surprised. He believed the soul could only be polished by friction, the way a stone is smoothed by a river running over it, for centuries. Of all the creatures on this planet, only one weeps tears that are connected to emotion. Animals produce tears to lubricate and protect their eyes, and some animals cry out in distress, but the actual release of emotional tears, the kind that spill down your cheeks when something is overwhelmingly beautiful or unbearably sad, is something that belongs entirely to human beings. Scientists believe emotional crying serves a social function, a signal to others that we are in need of comfort or connection. The tears themselves contain stress hormones and other chemicals that are released from the body during the act of crying, which may explain why so many people report feeling lighter and more settled after a long cry. It is one of the most intimate things a human body can do, and it is something we can sometimes do over characters in books who never existed, or music played by people we will never meet, which says something extraordinary about the depth of our capacity to feel. Right now, at this very moment, if you are not reading or listening to something that demands your full attention, a quiet part of your mind is likely drifting somewhere else entirely. Researchers have found that humans spend roughly a third of their waking hours in a state of mind wandering, a mode in which the brain is not focused on the task at hand, but is instead roaming freely through memories, imagined futures, unresolved problems, and idle fantasies. This happens through a network of brain regions called the default mode network, which hums along in the background whenever the mind is not actively engaged. Far from being a sign of laziness or inattention, this wandering state is now understood to be one of the places where the deepest thinking happens. It is where creative connections are made, where grief is slowly processed, and where a person quietly rehearses who they want to become. The daydream is not an escape from life. It is one of the places where life is most quietly and seriously being lived. Leo Tolstoy was one of the most celebrated writers in all of human history, author of 2 of the longest and most beloved novels ever written, a man whose work was read by emperors and peasants alike. And yet, in the second half of his life, Tolstoy became convinced that his wealth and fame were not gifts, but poisons. He gave away the rights to his work. He dressed as a peasant. He worked in the fields alongside the poorest people on his estate, trying to live the simple life he believed the aristocracy had abandoned. He was haunted by a belief, shared by philosophers across many centuries and cultures, that material wealth creates a kind of spiritual numbness, separating people from the things that actually matter: labor, connection, honesty and the quiet acceptance of mortality. He died in 1910, having fled his own estate at the age of 82, seeking the simple death of a simple man. Whether he found peace is uncertain, but what he was looking for still calls to something in almost everyone who reads his story. Inside your brain, there is a class of neurons that do something almost magical. They fire not only when you perform an action yourself, but when you watch someone else perform that same action. These are called mirror neurons, and their discovery in the 1990s transformed the way scientists think about empathy. When you watch someone stub their toe and wince in sympathy, your brain is not merely imagining what pain feels like. It is activating some of the very same neural patterns that would fire if the pain were your own. This is part of why great literature moves us so deeply. When Dostoevsky places us inside the mind of a man on his way to murder, or Tolstoy shows us a dying soldier reaching for the moonlight, we are not observing from the outside. Our brains are partially living those experiences alongside the characters. Reading fiction is not passive entertainment. It is, in a very real neurological sense, a rehearsal for being human, a way of accumulating emotional experience far beyond what any single life could hold. There is a word, not widely known but beloved by those who discover it, for the particular pleasure of smelling old books. The word is bibliosmia. The scent itself comes from the slow chemical breakdown of the paper, a process that releases compounds with warm, slightly vanilla-like, faintly musty qualities. But the experience of smelling an old book is rarely just a sensory event. For most people, it is a time machine. The smell carries the memory of libraries visited in childhood, of rainy afternoons when a book was the whole world, of a grandparent's shelf or a school reading corner. This is because smell is the only sense that bypasses the thalamus and routes directly to the limbic system, the part of the brain most closely associated with memory and emotion. The scent of an old book, more than a photograph, more than a song, can return you to a specific moment in your past with a vividness that feels almost physical. It is one of the quieter and stranger gifts of being human. When William Shakespeare sat down to write his plays in the late 16th and early 17th centuries, he faced a problem that any writer faces. Sometimes the language that already exists simply does not have a word for what you are trying to say. Shakespeare's solution was to invent one. Scholars have catalogued more than 1,700 words that appear for the first time in Shakespeare's works, words that have since become so embedded in everyday English that most people have no idea they came from a single playwright working in London 4 centuries ago. Words like bedroom, lonely, generous, gloomy, radiant, obscene, and countless others. He did not just entertain his audiences. He handed them new concepts, new ways of carving up inner and outer experience, new containers for thoughts that had previously been too vague or formless to name. Language shapes thought, and Shakespeare, perhaps more than any other writer in the English language, shaped the very categories through which generations of people understood themselves and the world around them. The human brain does not process stories the way it processes lists of facts or instructions. When you read a list of historical dates, specific regions of the brain light up to handle language and memory. But when you read a story, something broader and more mysterious happens. The brain activates as though the events of the story are actually occurring. Descriptions of physical movement activate the motor cortex. Descriptions of smell activate the olfactory regions. Descriptions of texture and sensation activate the sensory cortex. Narrative pulls the entire brain into a kind of simulation. Researchers call this narrative transportation, the state in which a reader becomes so immersed in a story that the boundary between fiction and reality softens. This is not a flaw in human reasoning. It is one of our oldest and most essential features, a survival tool that allowed early humans to learn from shared experience without having to face every danger personally. The campfire story was the original classroom, and the brain still responds to it with the same ancient hunger. Franz Kafka wrote the story that would define him in a single night. The Metamorphosis, in which a man wakes up to find he has transformed into a giant insect, came pouring out of him in one sitting in November of 1912. Kafka was deeply anxious about his identity, his relationship with his domineering father, his sense of being fundamentally alien and unrecognizable, even within his own family. The story was not really about an insect. It was about what it feels like to wake up one day and find that the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally now regard you as a burden. Kafka spent much of his life feeling that way. He worked as an insurance clerk and wrote in the nights, terrified that his writing would never be enough, that he himself would never be enough. He asked his friend Max Brod to burn all his manuscripts after his death. Brod did not. And because of that act of disobedience, the world received one of the most honest records of human anxiety ever put on paper. There is something in the human brain that treats bad news as more urgent and more important than good news. Psychologists call this the negativity bias, and it is not a character flaw, but an evolutionary inheritance. In an environment where missing a threat could mean death, the ancestors who paid closest attention to danger survived long enough to become your ancestors. The result is a brain that scans for problems, remembers insults more vividly than compliments, and rehearses worst-case scenarios with far more energy than it spends imagining best-case ones. This same bias shapes what we remember from literature. The tragedy lingers longer than the comedy. The betrayal cuts deeper than the kindness. Dostoevsky understood this instinctively. His novels are filled with suffering precisely because suffering is what the mind cannot look away from, what it turns over and over in the dark, like a stone it cannot put down. Learning about the negativity bias does not always free us from it, but naming it gives us just enough distance to begin to breathe. In December of 1849, Fyodor Dostoevsky was led to a square in St. Petersburg with a group of other political prisoners. They were dressed in execution clothes and given the last rites. The firing squad raised their rifles. And then, at the last possible moment, a courier arrived with a reprieve from the Tsar. It had been a staged mock execution, intended to break the prisoners psychologically. In Dostoevsky's case, it broke something open instead. He wrote later about those final moments, about how time seemed to stretch out, about how each second became a universe of its own. He emerged from the experience permanently altered, with a deep and unshakable sense that every moment of life was extraordinary simply because it existed. That near-death revelation is visible in everything he wrote afterward. The intensity, the urgency, the sense that every conversation is the most important conversation anyone has ever had. He had been shown the door closing, and everything that came after was lit by that darkness. Long before infants can speak, before they can walk or feed themselves or hold their own heads upright, they are already paying attention to fairness. Researchers at Yale University discovered that babies as young as 15 months show a clear preference for individuals who share resources equally over those who distribute them unequally. When puppets in an experiment gave out toys in lopsided ways, babies as young as 1 year old looked longer at the unfair puppet and reached more frequently toward the fair one. This suggests that the human sense of justice is not learned through moral education or religious teaching, but arrives with us, wired into the architecture of our perception from the very beginning. Tolstoy wrote entire novels about the injustice embedded in Russian society, and Dostoevsky made the courtroom the arena for his deepest philosophical questions. But both of them were writing about something their readers recognized at the very core, something that did not need to be taught because it had always already been known. Victor Hugo was famously prone to distraction. He found it nearly impossible to sit still and write when there were dinners to attend, conversations to be had, and the political chaos of 19th century France constantly demanding his attention. So when he needed to finish The Hunchback of Notre Dame on deadline, he reportedly had his servants lock away all his formal clothes, leaving him with nothing to wear outside. Unable to go out, he sat down and wrote. By the time he came to write Les Miserables, he had refined his strategy further. There are accounts, likely embellished but pointing toward a real habit, of Hugo shutting himself in his room with nothing but ink and paper, sometimes in a state that left no confusion about his priorities. Whether the particulars are historically precise is beside the point. What the story captures is true of every serious writer. The work requires the elimination of escape routes. You cannot cross a threshold you have left wide open. The great books were written by people who found ways to make sitting still the only option. Sharing food is one of the oldest and most powerful bonding mechanisms in human experience. Long before restaurants, before agriculture, before cities, our ancestors gathered around fires and divided whatever they had. The act of giving food to another person signals something deep and ancient. I trust you enough to share what keeps me alive. Modern research confirms that shared meals increase feelings of cooperation, trust, and closeness between strangers, even in controlled laboratory settings. People who eat the same food during a negotiation reach agreement faster than those who eat different things. Families who eat together report stronger emotional bonds. In literature, the shared meal is almost always a scene of significance, a moment where allegiances are declared or broken, where the most important conversations happen. In Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, the table is a stage. In the Bible, the Last Supper is a meal. In every culture across recorded history, the act of eating together has meant, "You are safe with me." That ancient meaning has not faded. Leo Tolstoy did not write War and Peace once. He rewrote it 7 times, in full, across 6 years of work. His wife Sophia hand-copied successive drafts until her fingers ached, a remarkable act of devotion that Tolstoy himself sometimes took for granted. He was never satisfied. He tore apart chapters that were already masterpieces by anyone else's measure and rebuilt them from the foundations because he felt something was not yet alive in the language. This obsessive revision was not the behavior of someone plagued by self-doubt. It was the behavior of someone with an extremely clear vision of what he was reaching for, and the unrelenting patience to keep reaching even when ordinary people would have declared the thing finished years ago. The finished novel is over 500,000 words long and is widely considered one of the greatest achievements in the history of human literature. It contains hundreds of characters and somehow makes each one feel as fully real and particular as a person you have known your whole life. Revision was not the enemy of the work, it was the work. When you read a metaphor, something interesting happens inside your body. The phrase, "she had a rough day," does not just activate the language processing areas of your brain, it also activates the somatosensory cortex, the region that processes the physical sensation of touching rough surfaces. The phrase, "he was sweet," activates areas associated with taste. Embodied cognition researchers have found that language is not stored in the brain as abstract symbols, but as sensory motor experiences that we understand the world through the body even when we are only reading words on a page. This means that great writers who deploy sensory and physical language are not just decorating their prose with pleasant imagery. They are quite literally pulling their readers into a shared physical experience. Dostoevsky's descriptions of fever and cold and confinement land differently than a clinical account of the same facts because the brain does not read them as descriptions. It reads them as memories. Charlotte Brontë was invisible to the literary world, and she knew it. Women in Victorian England were not supposed to have strong opinions, restless minds, or burning ambitions. So she published Jane Eyre in 1847 under the name Currer Bell, a deliberately ambiguous name that allowed readers to assume the author was male. And then the novel itself, this story of a plain, poor, passionate governess who insists on her own worth and refuses to surrender her integrity for comfort or security, arrived in the world like a fist on a table. Jane Eyre was not just a love story. It was a manifesto written for everyone who had ever been dismissed because of what they looked like, who they were born to, or what society had decided they were worth. Brontë was writing about her own invisible life, her own hunger, her own refusal to be reduced. More than a century and a half later, readers still feel the specific heat of that refusal on the page, because the feeling it addresses has not gone anywhere. First impressions are made in approximately 7 seconds. Before a person has spoken more than a sentence, before you have had time to learn anything meaningful about them, your brain has already formed a global judgment about their trustworthiness, competence, warmth, and status. And here is the unsettling part. Research consistently shows that these snap judgments are remarkably resistant to change, even when subsequent information directly contradicts them. This is not a trivial quirk. It shapes hiring decisions, romantic choices, verdicts in courtrooms, and the kind of treatment people receive from strangers every day. Shakespeare understood this instinctively. His villains are often beautiful or charming. Iago is eloquent. Richard III wins the audience with his wit. His heroes are sometimes plain or awkward. He was forever probing the gap between appearance and reality, between what the eye grabs in the first 7 seconds and what patient observation over time reveals. We know about this bias now. We are still, most of us, helpless against it. Fyodor Dostoevsky suffered from epilepsy throughout his adult life, and his seizures were not the terrifying, violent episodes most people imagine when they hear the word. Some of them were, but others, the ones he described in interviews and embedded into his characters, particularly Prince Mishkin in The Idiot, were preceded by an aura of such overwhelming beauty and clarity that he found them almost impossible to describe. In those few seconds before the seizure took hold, he wrote, he experienced a sense of harmony and joy so complete that it seemed worth all the suffering that came after. He called it a feeling of total synthesis, a moment in which everything seemed to be understood and everything seemed to be right. Modern neuroscience has documented similar reports from people with temporal lobe epilepsy, sometimes called ecstatic seizures. These neurological events gave Dostoevsky something that many writers never find: direct, personal access to states of consciousness that exist at the very edge of what language can hold. When two people feel genuine safety and warmth in each other's presence, their bodies begin to synchronize in ways that go far deeper than conscious awareness. Breathing rates align. Heart rates edge toward the same rhythm. When people share a story or a laugh, their neural activity can mirror each other's in measurable ways, a phenomenon researchers call neural coupling or brain-to-brain synchrony. This synchronization is not metaphorical, it is a measurable biological event, and it seems to be one of the ways that trust is built and maintained between people, a kind of physical confirmation that two nervous systems have recognized each other as safe. In literature, the deepest scenes of intimacy often hinge on exactly this kind of quiet alignment. Think of the moments in great novels where two characters simply sit together in silence, and somehow that silence says everything. Tolstoy was masterful at these scenes. The harmony between two people, he seemed to understand, was not built with words. It was felt in the body first. Alexandre Dumas was a man of enormous appetites and enormous suffering. He was the grandson of an enslaved woman in the Caribbean, a fact that he sometimes embraced and sometimes concealed depending on the company he was keeping in the complicated racial landscape of 19th century France. He was mocked, patronized, and dismissed by parts of the literary establishment who could not accept that a man of his background could write at the level he did. And out of all of that, out of the longing for justice and the anger at being wrongly judged and the desire to see those who had caused suffering finally face their reckoning, he wrote The Count of Monte Cristo, the story of a man unjustly imprisoned who escapes and spends years engineering the perfect revenge, is one of the most satisfying novels ever written because it touches something that almost every human being has felt. Dumas did not write the fantasy of revenge. He wrote the reality of what injustice does to the soul and how long a person can burn on that particular fuel. There is a window of time in the creative day that most people waste. Late at night, or very early in the morning when the mind is soft and slightly unfocused, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for critical thinking and self-censorship, is less active than it is during peak alertness. And research has found that this is precisely when creative thinking improves. The brain, without its usual guardian standing at the gate, allows connections between disparate ideas that would be filtered out during more vigilant states. This is why so many writers do their best work in odd hours. Kafka at midnight, Fitzgerald through the early hours, countless others who discovered that exhaustion sometimes unlocks a door, that effort holds shut. The analytical mind is magnificent, but it is also a gatekeeper, and the most original ideas often need to slip past it while it is drowsy. The trick is not to be always tired. The trick is to know when the gate is open. Oscar Wilde wrote The Picture of Dorian Gray in 1890, and it reads less like a Victorian novel and more like a warning delivered from just beyond the edge of history. Dorian, the beautiful young man who sells his soul to remain forever young while his portrait ages in his place, was not a fantastical character to Wilde. He was a diagnosis. Wilde believed that his society, and perhaps every society, was hurtling toward a moment when surfaces would be worshipped above substance, when beauty and the appearance of success would be treated as the only meaningful truths. He wrote that the books people call immoral are books that show the world its own shame. More than a century after he wrote those words, in a world of filtered photographs and follower counts and the constant performance of the ideal self, Wilde seems less like a prophet and more like someone who simply looked at the logic of things and followed it to its obvious conclusion. The portrait is still aging. Most of us just do not look at it. Before a baby is born, before it has taken a single breath of air, it is already learning. From the third trimester onward, the fetus can hear sounds from the outside world, filtered and muffled by the womb, but present. And among all the sounds it hears, the most consistent and most significant is the voice of its mother. Researchers have found that newborns show a distinct preference for their mother's voice over any other voice on the first day of life, and that they can distinguish the rhythm and melody of their native language from other languages within hours of birth. They arrived already carrying something. This prenatal learning shapes what feels familiar and safe in the very earliest days of life. And that early template of safety, built in the dark and the warmth before the world began, has echoes that run through everything. The first voice you ever heard was not a stranger's. It was already someone you knew. At the end of the Brothers Karamazov, the last and greatest novel Dostoevsky completed before his death, there sits a question that philosophy and theology and millions of thoughtful human beings have circled for well over a century. Ivan Karamazov, the intellectual brother, does not argue that God does not exist. He argues something more precise and more devastating. That even if God exists, even if there is a cosmic plan and a final harmony waiting at the end of history, he refuses to accept that plan. Because the suffering of innocent children cannot be justified by any paradise that comes afterward. The tears of a single child, he says, are too high a price for any harmony. Dostoevsky, who was deeply religious, could not answer Ivan. He offered his answer through the character of Alyosha, through acts of love and kindness and presence, rather than argument. But the question Ivan asks, whether morality can exist without God, whether goodness is something built into the universe or something we choose in the face of indifference, has not been answered in all the years since. It may be the most important question human beings have. There is a strange paradox at the heart of human knowledge, one that researchers David Dunning and Justin Kruger first mapped in 1999, when they noticed something quietly devastating about the way minds work. The less a person knows about a subject, the more confident they tend to feel about it. This is not merely ignorance. It is ignorance without the awareness of ignorance, which makes it far more dangerous and far more human. A beginner picks up a guitar and imagines they could perform on a stage within months. A novice investor makes 3 good trades and believes they have cracked a code that professionals have missed. The expert, meanwhile, sits with her decades of accumulated knowledge and feels uncertain because she can see the full terrain of what she does not yet understand. Dunning and Kruger were not describing stupidity. They were describing the fundamental architecture of a learning mind, one that must first believe before it can discover. Confidence, it turns out, is not a sign of mastery. It is often the first symptom of beginning. Mary Shelley was 18 years old when she sat beside Lake Geneva during a stormy summer and began writing the story that would become Frankenstein. And what she created was not really a monster story at all. It was a story about abandonment, about what happens when a creator walks away from the thing they have made. Victor Frankenstein does not destroy his creature because it is evil. He abandons it because it is ugly, because the reality of what he has built does not match the dream he had been chasing. And the creature, left without a name, without love, without any mirror in which to see itself reflected with warmth, becomes exactly what neglect tends to produce. Mary Shelley knew abandonment intimately. Her mother, the philosopher Mary Wollstonecraft, died 11 days after giving birth to her. She grew up in the shadow of that loss. Frankenstein is not about science run amok. It is a teenage girl's meditation on what it feels like to be left behind by the person who was supposed to love you most. There is a number that lives somewhere in the architecture of the human brain, a cognitive ceiling that most of us will never exceed, no matter how social we try to be. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar studied primate brains in the 1990s and discovered a surprising relationship between the size of the neocortex and the size of the social groups a species tends to maintain. When he applied that ratio to humans, he arrived at approximately 150. That is the number of people with whom a person can maintain a genuine, meaningful relationship. Not acquaintances, not followers, not contacts saved in a phone, but real relationships built on mutual knowledge and shared history. Most villages throughout human history hovered around this number. Most military companies are organized around it. Most functional offices operate within it. Beyond 150, social cohesion require hierarchy, rules, and enforcement. Below it, trust and reciprocity do most of the work. We are a social species, but we are a small group social species, and no amount of technology has yet rewired that quiet limit. In 1964, a young woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked outside her apartment building in New York City, and the story that followed, that 38 neighbors witnessed the attack and none called for help, became one of the most disturbing case studies in modern psychology. The specific details of that original account have since been disputed, but the psychological principle it inspired has been confirmed again and again in laboratories and in life. The bystander effect describes a painful inversion of common sense. The more people present during an emergency, the less likely any single person is to intervene. Each witness assumes that someone else will act. Responsibility diffuses through a crowd like dye in water, spreading so thin it becomes invisible. This is not cruelty. It is the social brain making a quiet calculation. If no one else is alarmed, perhaps there is no alarm to be raised. The antidote, researchers have found, is specificity. When you need help, do not call out to a crowd. Look at one person and ask them directly. Miguel de Cervantes published the first part of Don Quixote in 1645, and he wrote a significant portion of it while imprisoned, which perhaps explains why the book knows so intimately what it feels like to live inside a story you have invented to protect yourself. Don Quixote is a man who has read so many chivalric romances that he can no longer distinguish between the world as it is and the world as it should be. He tilts at windmills because he sees giants. He mistakes an inn for a castle because his imagination is kinder than his circumstances. Literary scholars credit Cervantes with inventing the modern novel, not because he told a story, but because he told a story about the act of storytelling, about the way human beings use narrative to make an unmanageable world feel meaningful. He wrote it partly as satire, but something deeper crept in. Don Quixote is also a tender portrait of the dignity of dreaming, even when the dream makes you look like a fool. Researchers have found that people are significantly more honest in darkness than in light, which sounds like a moral paradox until you understand what is actually happening beneath it. Honesty is not just about values. It is about performance. When we are seen, we are always, to some degree, managing the impression we create. Clothing, posture, facial expression, word choice. These are all costumes we adjust depending on who is watching. In darkness, the performance relaxes. The social surveillance lifts. In experiments where participants wore dark sunglasses compared to clear lenses, those in darker glasses consistently behaved more generously and more honestly, even though they themselves could see just fine. It was the feeling of being less visible that changed their behavior. This is not hypocrisy. It is the continuous and exhausting weight of being perceived, which every social creature carries. We are always performing for an audience, even when we are alone, because the imagined eyes of others never fully close. Darkness simply dims them for a moment. Emily Dickinson lived most of her life within the walls of a single house in Amherst, Massachusetts, rarely leaving, rarely socializing, wearing white as if she had already stepped outside the conventions of the living. In that stillness, in those quiet rooms, she wrote 1,800 poems, only a handful of which were published during her lifetime, and those few were edited without her consent, their radical punctuation smoothed away. What she left in those packets of hand-stitched paper was one of the most original voices in the English language, a voice that bent grammar into new shapes to carry meanings that standard syntax could not hold. She wrote about death and immortality with the ease of someone who had already made her peace with both. She wrote about the self as a wilderness, about consciousness as a creature too large for its own house. Her isolation was not failure. It was the condition under which something rare and true could grow, undisturbed by the noise of a world that would not have understood it anyway. In the 18th century, Swiss soldiers serving far from home began experiencing a cluster of symptoms so severe that military physicians had to treat it as a medical condition. They grew listless and despondent. They stopped eating. They became consumed by memories of mountain valleys and specific sounds. Cowbells, particular winds, the dialect of their villages. A doctor named Johannes Hofer coined a term for this condition in 1688, combining the Greek words for homecoming and pain, nostalgia. For nearly 2 centuries, it was classified as a disease, a pathological longing for the past that could, in extreme cases, be fatal. Then psychology caught up with something ordinary people had always quietly suspected. Nostalgia, modern researchers have found, is not a wound. It is a resource. People who engage in nostalgic reflection report higher levels of meaning, stronger feelings of social connection, and greater resistance to loneliness. The past, remembered warmly, is not an escape from the present. It is a foundation beneath it, something solid to press your feet against when the ground of now feels uncertain. Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, published in 1884, achieved something that political argument rarely manages. It changed the way people felt. The novel follows a white boy and an enslaved man named Jim floating down the Mississippi River together, and over the course of that journey, the reader is asked to inhabit Huck's mind as he slowly, reluctantly, and then fiercely chooses Jim's humanity over everything society has taught him. The pivotal moment comes when Huck decides not to report Jim's location. Knowing this choice means he believes he will go to hell for it. He tears up the letter. He makes his choice. Twain understood that moral transformation does not happen through lectures or arguments, but through intimacy, through knowing someone well enough that their pain becomes real to you. Fiction, at its best, is an empathy machine, and Huck Finn was designed to run at full power. It made readers feel something first and think about it second, which is the only order that ever actually works. There is something almost philosophically scandalous about the placebo effect, because it suggests that the boundary between belief and biology is far more permeable than medicine has traditionally allowed. A sugar pill should not relieve pain. A saline injection should not reduce symptoms. And yet, in study after study, they do. Not in every person, not always, but reliably enough that the placebo effect must be included as a control in every serious clinical trial. What makes the effect even stranger is a discovery from recent decades. It persists, even when patients are told explicitly that what they are receiving is a placebo. Open-label placebo trials, where participants know they are taking an inert substance, have shown statistically significant improvements in conditions ranging from chronic pain to irritable bowel syndrome. Something in the ritual of care, the act of taking a treatment, the expectation of healing, seems to activate genuine physiological processes. The body, it turns out, listens to stories. And if the story is that help is on the way, the body begins, quietly, to prepare. Dostoevsky spent his entire literary life refusing to create characters who were consistent, and this was not a flaw in his craft. It was his central argument about human nature. His people contradict themselves. They believe in God and act as though they do not. They love someone and treat that person with cruelty. They confess their sins and commit them again before morning. Raskolnikov, in Crime and Punishment, is both a murderer and a man of conscience. And Dostoevsky insists we hold both truths at once. Ivan Karamazov can articulate a philosophy of compassion more beautifully than any saint while remaining emotionally unavailable to everyone around him. Dostoevsky's insight was that human beings are not characters in the classical sense. We are not organized around a single defining trait. We are bundles of contradictions capable of nobility and pettiness, sometimes within the same breath. And any honest portrait of a person has to include the parts that do not fit together neatly. If you have ever felt your face shift without choosing to shift it, a small smile while watching someone else smile, a slight furrow at someone else's distress, you have felt your mirror neurons at work. Humans begin mimicking facial expressions within 50 milliseconds of seeing them, a response so fast it happens below the threshold of conscious control. This is not imitation in the social sense. It is the body's first language, a form of communication older than words, older than culture, older than fire. The mimicry serves a profound function. By recreating the physical expression of an emotion on your own face, even subtly, your nervous system begins to sample that emotion from the inside. You feel what the other person feels briefly and faintly, like pressing your ear to a wall to hear the music playing in the next room. Empathy, in its oldest and most physical form, is not a thought or a decision. It is a reflex, built into the body, always running quietly in the background of every encounter. Jane Austen has been misread for 2 centuries as a writer of charming domestic romances, when what she was actually doing was constructing some of the most precise analyses of strategic behavior in the English literary tradition. Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Emma. These novels are fundamentally about the game-theoretic logic of social life in a world where women had almost no economic power, and marriage was the primary mechanism of survival. Every conversation in an Austen novel is a negotiation. Every social call is an information-gathering mission. Every refusal and acceptance carries strategic weight. Elizabeth Bennet's famous wit is not merely charming. It is a tool for maintaining leverage in a system designed to strip her of it. Economists and behavioral scientists have returned to Austen repeatedly, finding in her pages astonishingly accurate models of signaling, reputation management, and coalition building. She was not writing fantasies about love. She was mapping with surgical precision the hidden architecture of the world she was trapped inside, because understanding a trap is the first step toward escaping it. There is a state that athletes call being in the zone, that musicians call losing themselves, that surgeons describe as operating on autopilot, and that the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying and eventually named flow. It is the condition of total absorption in a task that is just challenging enough to demand full attention, but not so difficult that it produces panic. In flow, the inner critic goes quiet. The anxious monologue of self-consciousness falls away. Time compresses or disappears entirely. And when researchers ask people across cultures and professions to identify their happiest moments, it is almost never leisure that rises to the top. It is flow. It is the surgeon in the middle of a complex operation, the climber 300 feet up the rock face, the programmer whose fingers are moving faster than her thoughts. We are not designed for rest as our deepest happiness. We are designed for engagement, for the feeling of being fully used, fully present, and fully alive in the service of something that matters. Gabriel Garcia Marquez grew up listening to his grandmother tell stories, and she told them in a way that has become one of the most analyzed narrative techniques in all of literary criticism. She would describe miraculous, impossible events: a man ascending to heaven, a priest levitating above the ground. In the same flat, matter-of-fact tone she used to describe the weather or the price of bread, there was no performance of wonder in her voice, no signal to the listener that something unusual had occurred. Garcia Marquez realized, sitting at her knee, that magic becomes real when it is treated as ordinary. He carried that lesson into 100 years of solitude and every novel that followed, creating a literature in which the boundaries between the real and the fantastic are not marked, not policed, not explained. The style became known as magical realism, and it traveled outward from Colombia into world literature. But at its root, it was simply the grammar of a grandmother, of the way one woman told stories to a child she loved. The surgeon John Cacioppo spent decades accumulating evidence for a conclusion that is equal parts biological and heartbreaking. Chronic loneliness is as dangerous to human health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It is more damaging than obesity. It accelerates cognitive decline. It disrupts sleep at the cellular level, changing the way genes express themselves in immune cells, making the body more vulnerable to inflammation and disease. Loneliness evolved as a signal, like hunger or pain, designed to motivate social reconnection. When that reconnection does not come, the signal does not simply fade. It becomes chronic, and chronic alarm states exact a physical cost. What makes this finding particularly painful is that loneliness is not the same as being alone. Many people are alone and not lonely. Many people are surrounded by others and profoundly lonely, their surfaces touching but their interiors unreachable. It is the perceived absence of genuine connection that wounds. The sense that no one truly knows you, that the most important parts of you exist unseen and unwitnessed. Herman Melville published Moby Dick in 1851, and it was, by any measure of commercial publishing, a disaster. Critics were baffled, readers were alienated. The book sold poorly in his lifetime, and Melville spent his final decades working as a customs inspector in New York, largely forgotten. His extraordinary ambition quietly shelved. He died in 1891, and for 30 years after his death, Moby Dick sat at the edges of the literary world, acknowledged by a few but celebrated by almost no one. Then, in the 1920s, a group of scholars began to look again. What they found was staggering. A novel of such depth and invention that it seemed to belong to a century later than the one that had produced it. It was a philosophical epic, a meditation on obsession and fate, and the blank indifference of the natural world, compressed into the body of a whale hunt. Melville had written a masterpiece that his era could not hold. The book had simply waited, patient as its subject, for a world ready to receive it. Researchers have discovered something uncomfortable about the way the human brain manages uncertainty, a preference so fundamental it shapes decisions in almost every domain of life. Given a choice between a painful outcome that is certain and an uncertain outcome that might be painless, most people choose certainty, even the painful kind. This is why people stay in bad jobs rather than risk an unknown market. Why they remain in unhealthy relationships rather than face the open territory of being alone. The brain's threat detection systems treat uncertainty as a danger in itself, independent of outcome. Not knowing activates the same neural circuits as knowing something bad is coming, but the resolution of certainty, even bad certainty, allows those circuits to quiet. There is a grim efficiency to this. In an ancient world, knowing where the predator was allowed you to prepare. Not knowing where it was meant constant vigilance. The modern world has inherited that architecture, and so we pay enormous psychological costs to maintain the illusion of control, choosing the devil we know with a loyalty that the devil has certainly never earned. The Lithuanian Soviet psychologist Bluma Zygarnik noticed something in a Viennese cafe in the 1920s. Waiters had extraordinary memory for orders they had not yet delivered, but once a table was settled, those same orders vanished completely from their minds. The unfinished task held attention in a way the completed one did not. She brought this observation into the laboratory and confirmed it experimentally. Incomplete tasks are recalled far better than completed ones, because the mind keeps a background process running on anything it has not yet resolved, a quiet loop that returns to the problem again and again, checking whether it has been handled. This is why the chapter you left unfinished calls to you more insistently than the book you completed. Why the argument you never resolved lives longer in memory than the ones that reached a clean conclusion. Why a melody that stops a note too early is more haunting than one that resolves. The Zygarnik effect is the sound of an open loop, the mind's refusal to release what remains undone, circling back with the patience of something that has all the time in the world. Albert Camus framed what he considered the only truly serious philosophical question in the opening pages of The Myth of Sisyphus, published in 1942. Given the apparent absurdity of existence, the silence of the universe in response to human demands for meaning, why should anyone continue? His answer was not a comfortable one, not the answer of a man selling consolation. He said yes, not because life is meaningful in any cosmic sense, not because suffering is secretly worthwhile, not because God waits at the end of the road, but because the act of choosing to continue in full awareness of the absurdity is itself a form of revolt, a refusal to accept the terms the universe has set. Sisyphus, condemned to roll his boulder up a hill forever, must be imagined happy, Camus wrote, because in the straining of his muscles, in his awareness of the futility, in his choice to push anyway, there is a human defiance that the mountain cannot cancel. The question was not whether life is worth living. The question was, Who gets to decide? Music is one of the most neurologically extravagant things a human being can do, which is why the experience of listening to a piece you love feels so total, so consuming, so unlike any other form of perception. Researchers using brain imaging have found that music activates almost every region of the brain simultaneously. The motor cortex, the emotional centers, the memory systems, the language areas, the regions responsible for prediction and expectation. When you anticipate a chord resolving and it does, your brain releases dopamine. When a melody goes somewhere unexpected, your brain lights up with the same circuits it uses to process surprise in the physical world. Music is, in some sense, a simulation of the full human experience compressed into sound. It contains motion without movement, emotion without event, narrative without language, and it appears to be as old as our species, found in every culture that has ever existed, made on instruments found in caves tens of thousands of years old. Whatever music is for, we have never been without it, which suggests we cannot be. George Orwell wrote 1984 on the Scottish island of Jura, in a farmhouse with no telephone, accessible only by a rough track that flooded in heavy rain, while suffering from the tuberculosis that would kill him within 2 years of the book's completion. He was cold. He was frequently bedridden. He was alone for long stretches. His doctors pleaded with him to stop, arguing that the effort of writing was accelerating his decline, and he continued anyway, because the book had to exist. The result is a novel saturated with the feeling of a body in pain. Winston Smith's varicose ulcer, the physical brutality of the ministry of love, the weariness that pervades Oceania like weather. Orwell understood surveillance, doublethink, and the systematic destruction of truth not as abstract political theory, but as felt experience, because he was writing from inside a body that was itself being slowly occupied and overtaken by something he could not stop. 1984 is a dystopia, but it is also a portrait of what it costs to write the truth, when the truth is difficult to bear. Developmental psychologists have accumulated substantial evidence for something that parents and teachers have long, quietly suspected. Children who are read to regularly develop greater empathy than those who are not. And this effect is linked specifically to narrative fiction rather than information-based reading. When a child inhabits the perspective of a character who is unlike them, a child in a different country, a creature in a different world, a person in a different century, they practice the cognitive and emotional movement of perspective taking, of temporarily vacating their own point of view and inhabiting another. This practice is not trivial. It builds the neural pathways that underlie moral reasoning, the ability to consider how one's actions affect others, the habit of asking what it might feel like to be someone else. Stories are empathy training, and they begin working very early. The child who has spent thousands of hours inside the lives of imaginary others is, research suggests, measurably better at recognizing and responding to the inner lives of real ones. Daniel Kahneman and his colleagues discovered something quietly devastating about the nature of human memory. We do not remember experiences as they actually occurred, stretched across time with all their ordinary moments weighted equally. Instead, we remember them through two narrow windows, their most intense point and their ending. This is the peak-end rule, and it governs the way we evaluate almost everything we go through. A medical procedure that ends with diminishing discomfort is remembered as less painful than one of shorter duration that ends sharply, even if the total suffering of the longer procedure was greater. A vacation that concludes with a perfect evening is remembered more warmly than one with more days of pleasure, but an unfortunate final morning. The rule has profound implications for the design of experience, for the endings of relationships, for the structure of stories, for the way we say goodbye. It means that the final note of an encounter echoes longer than all the notes before it. How we leave a moment matters more than most of the moment itself. Virginia Woolf developed a literary technique called stream of consciousness. Not as an intellectual experiment, but because she was, in some essential sense, trying to survive inside her own mind. She experienced what we would now recognize as bipolar disorder. Periods of extraordinary creative vitality followed by crashes into despair so complete that she heard voices, lost the ability to read, and sat for months in a darkness she could not describe to others. The stream of consciousness style, which allows a novel's perspective to drift freely through memory, association, sensation, and half-formed thought, was her attempt to render on the page the actual texture of mental experience. Not the organized grammatical thoughts we present to others, but the real fluid interior of a mind moving through a moment. Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse are not experiments in difficulty. They are acts of faithfulness to experience, attempts to tell the truth about what it actually feels like to be conscious, to be a self, to move through a single day, carrying everything you have ever been. She did not invent the stream of consciousness. She simply had the courage to report what she found when she listened. There is something tender about the dreaming mind, how it labors so faithfully each night, spinning whole worlds from shadow and memory, and then lets them dissolve before you even fully wake. Scientists have measured this. Across a typical night, a human being spends roughly 2 hours in dream states, the eyes darting behind closed lids, the brain lighting up in patterns nearly indistinguishable from waking consciousness. Yet 95% of those dreams vanish within minutes of waking, gone so completely, it is as if they never were. There is no tragedy in this, or perhaps there is a small one, a gentle one, the kind you can hold without grief. Some researchers believe the forgetting is protective, that the dreaming brain processes emotion precisely by loosening memory's grip. Others think the dreams simply serve their purpose and release. Either way, the mind dreams faithfully every night of your life, constructing inner theaters and then quietly striking the set before morning. You have lived 1,000 lives you will never remember, and somehow that is beautiful. Henry David Thoreau walked into the Massachusetts woods on the 4th of July, 1845, carrying borrowed tools and enormous intentions. He wanted, as he wrote, to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see what they had to teach. The cabin he built at Walden Pond was small enough to feel intimate, large enough to hold a searching mind. He stayed 2 years, 2 months and 2 days, and what he found was not wilderness, but attention. He learned to watch a pond the way others watch a cathedral. He learned that time spent doing nothing particular was not time wasted, but time inhabited fully. Thoreau was not running away from the world, he was running toward himself, toward the still center that civilization makes so difficult to locate. When he returned, he brought a philosophy with him, that the deliberate life, the examined life, the life chosen rather than inherited, is the only life worth the name of living. Something quiet happens in the brain when it turns toward gratitude. Neuroscientists imaging the brain during gratitude practices have found increases in grey matter density in regions associated with emotional regulation, social bonding, and the capacity for empathy. The brain, it turns out, does not simply feel gratitude. It grows from it, reshaping itself around the repeated experience of appreciation, the way a river reshapes the land it passes through. People who maintain gratitude journals show measurable changes in neural architecture over weeks. The prefrontal cortex strengthens, the amygdala quiets. Sleep improves, as it happens to, because a brain that has spent its waking hours noticing gifts rather than grievances enters the night in a different chemical state. Softer, less vigilant, more willing to rest. There is wisdom encoded in every tradition that has asked its followers to give thanks. Not because the universe requires our gratitude, but because we require it. Because the counting of blessings is, quite literally, a form of self-healing. Before Charlotte, Emily, and Anne Bronte wrote the novels that would reshape English literature, they built entire worlds in secret. As children on the Yorkshire moors, the siblings created elaborate imaginary kingdoms, Gondal, Angria, with their brother Branwell, filling tiny handwritten books with the histories, politics, love affairs, and wars of peoples who never existed. They were practicing without knowing they were practicing, training the imagination the way a musician trains the fingers, building up in private what would later pour out in public. Charlotte's Jane Eyre, Emily's Wuthering Heights, Anne's The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. All of them carry the smell of those moorland wind and those childhood kingdoms, that early habit of inventing lives more vivid than the circumscribed ones available to Victorian women. The inner world tended faithfully from childhood becomes a resource that never runs dry. The Brontes remind us that all great work is the overflow of long, quiet, private practice. Worlds within worlds, built first in the imagination. The human brain is a pattern-finding engine so powerful, it finds patterns even where none exist. Pareidolia is the name scientists give to this tendency, the experience of seeing faces in clouds, animals in wood grain, human expressions in the craters of the moon. It is not a flaw in perception, but an artifact of a profoundly social brain that evolved to recognize faces above all else so quickly and so automatically that it sometimes misfires. Every face you see in a rock formation or a gnarled tree trunk is evidence of how intensely your brain is tuned for human connection, how desperately it searches the visual field for the sign of another self. There is something almost touching about it, the brain scanning the entire world for companionship, finding it even in clouds. And perhaps the impulse is not entirely mistaken. Perhaps the universe is full of patterns, and the human eye, overreaching, occasionally glimpses something real in the shapes it was never quite meant to see. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke received a letter in 1903 from a young military cadet who wanted to know if his poems were any good. Rilke wrote back with one of the most generous letters in the history of literature, and the advice he gave was not about technique, but about patience. He told the young man to stop seeking answers and instead to love the questions themselves, to live inside the questions the way you live inside a room. The answers, Rilke promised, would come in time if the questions were truly lived and not merely entertained. This is a radical kind of wisdom, one that runs against every instinct toward resolution and certainty. It requires a tolerance for not knowing, a willingness to let the question remain open while life fills in around it. Rilke was describing the creative life, but he was also describing something more universal. The kind of patient, open presence that allows understanding to arrive in its own time, unhurried and complete. When someone across the room yawns and you feel the yawn rise in your own throat without permission, you are experiencing one of the body's oldest forms of empathy. Yawning is contagious. This has been known for centuries, but the mechanism is more interesting than it might seem. Neuroscientists have traced the contagion to mirror neurons and to the same systems of empathic neural coupling that allow one person to feel the pain or joy of another. We catch yawns most readily from the people we are closest to, partners, family members, close friends. And the more empathic a person tends to be, the more contagiously susceptible they are. Even reading about yawning, as you may be discovering now, can trigger the reflex. The body is a remarkably social instrument, tuned to resonate with the bodies around it, picking up their signals without consultation with the conscious mind. Long before language existed, before any word had been invented, the body was already in conversation with other bodies, mirroring and responding and connecting through gesture. Marcel Proust bit into a madeleine soaked in lime blossom tea and found himself suddenly, helplessly back in his childhood. The whole village of Cambrai arising from that small sensory act with a vividness that voluntary memory could never produce. He made this moment the cornerstone of his 7-volume masterwork, and neuroscience has since confirmed what he was describing. The olfactory system is uniquely wired into the brain. Scent bypasses the thalamus, the brain's usual sensory relay station, and travels directly to the amygdala and hippocampus, the centers of emotion and memory. This is why smells reach back further and hit harder than any other sense. Why a particular cologne can resurrect a person gone for 20 years. Why the smell of rain on hot pavement can return you to a summer afternoon from childhood with startling completeness. Proust was not being merely poetic. He had noticed something true about the architecture of human memory, something that took neuroscience another century to confirm and name. There is a quiet shift that happens inside a person who feels observed. Studies have shown that people become measurably more generous, more cooperative, more pro-social when they believe eyes are watching. And remarkably, the eyes do not need to be real. A photograph of a pair of eyes posted on a wall near a donation box or an honor system coffee station increases honest behavior significantly. The effect seems to operate below conscious awareness, triggering something ancient in the social brain. The same instinct that made reputation so vital in small ancestral communities where everyone knew everyone and generosity was tracked and remembered. We behave, it seems, as though we are always being seen, or as though we ought to be. There is something quietly hopeful in this finding. It suggests that the better self is not far beneath the surface, waiting only for a small prompt, a pair of painted eyes, the sense of a social witness, to emerge and act with kindness. Flannery O'Connor wrote about grace the way a lightning strike writes about electricity. Sudden, violent, unavoidable. Her stories are full of characters who resist the sacred, who are comfortable in their small certainties and then are cracked open by something enormous and ungoverned. A traveling Bible salesman steals a wooden leg. A grandmother is shot in a Georgia ditch and finds, in the last possible moment, something like genuine love for the man killing her. O'Connor believed that grace, the freely given, unearned gift of transformation, often enters through violence because that is the only crack wide enough to let it through. For people already broken open, grace can arrive gently. But for those sealed tight in self-satisfaction, it needs a crowbar. She wrote this with deep Catholic conviction, but also with a clarity about human psychology that transcends doctrine, that we are most capable of change, of real change, at the moments when we are most completely undone by what we could not control. The story that humans now have an 8-second attention span, shorter than a goldfish, is not true, and it is worth pausing to say so clearly. The study that produced that number was never peer-reviewed, and its methodology was opaque. What researchers have actually found is something more nuanced and more interesting. In a world saturated with information, humans have become extraordinarily skilled at filtering. We dismiss the irrelevant more quickly, yes, but when something genuinely captures our interest, we attend to it with sustained intensity. Long-form podcasts, 10-hour YouTube streams, sprawling novels, all of them find audiences. The human attention system did not shrink, it became more selective. It learned to say no more readily, which is not a diminishment, but an adaptation. The capacity for deep, sustained attention is still there, still intact, still available. It simply waits for something worthy of it. And when it finds that thing, it holds on with surprising, quiet tenacity. Jorge Luis Borges spent his career writing about labyrinths, infinite libraries, mirrors that multiply endlessly into the dark. And then, in his mid-50s, he went blind. The irony was not lost on him. A man whose entire world was text, whose joy was the feel of a book in his hands, losing sight in the public library he had directed for years. But Borges did not stop. He dictated, he memorized. He turned inward to a library built entirely from what he had already read, already loved, already known, and found it inexhaustible. The blindness, he said, was a gift of sorts. It forced him to work from memory and imagination alone, which gave his later work a quality of luminous interiority that his sighted years had not quite achieved. He is remembered now as one of the 20th century's greatest writers. The darkness did not silence him. It only changed the room where he worked, and that room turned out to be vast. Laughter is older than language, far older. Long before the first word was spoken, human ancestors were laughing, and the sound of it was likely closer to the panting vocalizations of great apes than to the laughter we produce now. Primatologists have identified laughter in chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, and orangutans, always in the context of play, always as a signal of safety and pleasure and social connection. The evolutionary purpose is not comedy, but bonding. Laughter says, I am not a threat. Laughter says, we are together in this. Laughter says, you are safe with me. It arrived in our species before we had words for any of those things, and served in the wordless early world as the primary instrument of social cohesion. We still feel this in our bodies when we laugh with someone. The walls come down, something relaxes, the distance between self and other briefly dissolves. Every laugh shared is an ancient signal still carrying its original message. Here, in this moment, all is well. Toni Morrison wrote her first novel at the kitchen table in the pre-dawn hours before her children woke, in the margins of time that single motherhood and full-time editing left her. The Bluest Eye was written in stolen mornings, assembled from minutes and hours claimed before the rest of the day could consume them. She wrote this way for decades, rising early, writing in the darkness, working in the only silence the day reliably offered. Morrison said later that she had learned something crucial from those years of constraint. that limitation is not the enemy of art, but its shaping force, that the writer who waits for ideal conditions will wait forever, and that the discipline of showing up in imperfect circumstances is the discipline that produces work which lasts. She won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1993. The work she made in Stolen Morning Hours became part of the American canon. She found the time because she decided the time existed, and then she used it. There is a particular kind of self-consciousness that arrives, uninvited, in the middle of a social situation. The sudden certainty that everyone in the room has noticed your stumble, your awkward pause, your too loud laugh. Psychologists call this the spotlight effect, and experiments have confirmed that it operates almost universally. When subjects were asked to walk into a room wearing an embarrassing t-shirt, they estimated that roughly 50% of the people in the room had noticed it. The actual number was closer to 25. We consistently overestimate how much others observe and remember about us because we are, in a sense, the center of our own universe. And we mistakenly assume others share that perspective. The truth is gently liberating. People are mostly attending to themselves, their own worries, their own internal monologue. The spotlight you feel on your mistakes is largely imaginary. The world is watching itself, not you, and it is too busy with that task to notice the rest. Haruki Murakami took up running in his early 30s when he quit his jazz bar to write full-time, and he has run a marathon nearly every year since. He writes about this in his memoir with characteristic quiet precision. He does not run for health, or not only for health, but because the physical endurance required to complete 26 miles is the same endurance required to complete a novel. Both demand showing up when you would rather not. Both demand continuing when the body, or the mind, insists that stopping is reasonable. Both require a relationship with discomfort, an ability to sit inside difficulty without catastrophizing it. Murakami has said that writing a long novel is like surviving. You need basic physical strength simply to carry the weight of it day after day. The marathon is the training ground for that strength. He runs and then he writes, and then he runs again, and each discipline feeds the other in ways that have nothing to do with speed and everything to do with endurance. The sleeping brain performs a kind of emotional alchemy that the waking mind cannot accomplish on its own. During REM sleep, the dream-rich phase, the brain reprocesses the emotional events of the day, replaying them in a neurochemical environment stripped of the stress hormones that were present during the original experience. The memory is retained, but the raw emotional charge around it is gently reduced. This is why a situation that feels catastrophic at 10 in the evening often seems manageable at 8 the next morning. Sleep does not simply rest the brain, it edits it. It files what is important, softens what was sharp, and provides the emotional distance that perspective requires. People who are chronically sleep-deprived show measurably impaired emotional regulation. They react more intensely, recover more slowly, carry the weight of each difficult moment deeper into the next one. The phrase "sleep on it" carries genuine neurological wisdom. The sleeping mind knows what to do with our feelings. We only need to give it the chance. The ancient Greeks had 2 words for happiness, and the distinction between them still matters. Hedonia was the pleasure of the moment, comfort, satisfaction, the gratification of desire. Eudaimonia was something different and deeper, the happiness of a life well lived, of potential fully realized, of virtue expressed in action. Aristotle considered eudaimonia the highest human good, not because pleasure was wrong, but because it was incomplete. A kind of happiness that arrived and departed, dependent on circumstance, unable to sustain itself through difficulty. Eudaimonia was the happiness that came from flourishing as a human being, from living in accordance with one's deepest capacities, from contributing to the good of others. Modern psychology has returned to this distinction, finding that eudaimonic well-being, meaning purpose, growth, predicts long-term mental health more reliably than hedonic pleasure alone. The Greeks were mapping territory that science is still exploring. They understood that the good life is not the comfortable life, but the life that is fully, deliberately, generously inhabited. Charles Darwin, who thought carefully about everything, was particularly puzzled by blushing. He called it the most peculiar and most human of all expressions. Every other emotional response, fear, joy, grief, laughter, appears in some form in other animals. Blushing does not. It is uniquely, exclusively human. The mechanism involves an involuntary expansion of blood vessels in the face in response to social self-consciousness. The awareness that others are watching and forming judgments. What makes this strange is that it is precisely the kind of response you would not want in that situation. Conspicuous, uncontrollable, drawing exactly the attention you are trying to deflect. Darwin puzzled over why evolution would preserve something so apparently counterproductive. The current best understanding is that blushing functions as a genuine social signal, a kind of involuntary apology, a visible acknowledgement that you know you have violated a social norm and that you care about the community's regard. The blush says, "I am embarrassed because I belong here and I know it." Italo Calvino believed that the world, in the 20th century, had grown heavy. Not heavier in the physical sense, but specifically heavy with weight, with seriousness, with ideology, with the accumulated gravity of history and its catastrophes. And so he made his life's work an exploration of lightness as a literary and philosophical value. Not lightness as frivolity or escapism, but lightness as a way of approaching the heavy things, lightly, with agility and wit and the willingness to lift off from solid ground. His novels play in the air, a boy who climbs into the trees and never descends, a man who exists only as armor, cities that float above the earth. He was not avoiding reality, but finding a different angle of approach to it, one that allowed beauty and wonder to coexist with difficulty. Calvino's lightness is a practice, the practice of holding the weight of living without being crushed by it, of remaining buoyant in the face of everything that would press you down. Researchers studying decision-making across different languages discovered something unexpected. When people reason through moral dilemmas in a foreign language, they tend to make more rational and less emotionally reactive choices. The effect appears because a second language, learned later in life and used less automatically, creates a small cognitive distance from the emotional freight of the mother tongue. The native language carries childhood fears, family dramas, and the deepest associations of the self. A second language is cleaner, cooler, slightly abstract. It allows you to consider a problem without the full weight of who you are pressing down on every word. This is not a case for abandoning one's mother tongue, but for understanding that perspective can be created through language itself, that the act of thinking in a different code genuinely changes the quality of the thinking. The foreign language is a kind of tool for stepping slightly outside the self. And from that slight distance, sometimes, clarity arrives. Ray Bradbury rented a typewriter in the basement of a UCLA library in 1950 and wrote Fahrenheit 451 in 9 days, paying a dime for every 30 minutes of typing time. the entire novel, the fireman who burns books in a future America, the mechanical hound, the people who memorize literature to carry it in their bodies, cost him $9.80 in typing fees. Bradbury wrote in that kind of sustained, ferocious burst because he had no other choice. He could not afford to linger, could not afford the luxury of revision during composition, had to write fast and trust that what came was real. The constraint produced a kind of heat in the prose that careful, unhurried work might have cooled. Some of the greatest works of literature were written under conditions that were anything but ideal. Too fast, too poor, too pressed for time. The urgency, it turns out, was not a problem to be overcome. It was the fuel. The mere exposure effect is one of psychology's most quietly radical findings. We prefer things simply because we have encountered them before. In study after study, repeated exposure to a stimulus, a face, a piece of music, a pattern, a word in an unfamiliar language, reliably increases the positive feeling associated with it, without any conscious awareness that familiarity is driving the preference. You think you like something because of its qualities. In many cases, you like it because you have seen it. This explains the strange loyalty we feel to the music of our adolescence, the comfort of a familiar face, the warmth that an old photograph carries. Familiarity itself generates affection, regardless of merit. The implications are both humbling and tender. Much of what we love simply because it was there, because it appeared again and again in the landscape of our lives, until it became part of the furniture of the self, until distinguishing it from love became impossible. Around the year 1000, a noblewoman at the Japanese imperial court was writing in secret, in the pre-dawn hours, the story that many scholars now consider the world's first novel. Murasaki Shikibu, lady-in-waiting to the empress, composed the tale of Genji, a vast, subtle, psychologically intricate narrative of court life, love, loss, and the passage of time, centuries before the European novel existed as a form. She invented interiority, the representation of a character's inner life unfolding in real time. She invented the novel of consciousness. She did this in a culture that did not encourage women to write serious literature in stolen hours, in a medium, Japanese hiragana script, that was considered informal precisely because women used it. What she created was the foundation of an entire literary tradition, and she created it in the dark, quietly, as women so often have made the things that last. The world's first novel was a secret kept for 1,000 years. When a room falls truly silent, something begins. Researchers studying the effects of silence on the brain have found that 2 hours of quiet each day prompts the growth of new cells in the hippocampus, the brain region central to memory formation and emotional regulation. This was an unexpected finding. The study was designed to examine noise, and silence was included as a control condition. The silence turned out to be the most interesting result. The hippocampus, it seems, uses quiet the way a garden uses rain, as the condition under which new growth becomes possible. In the absence of incoming information, the brain does not idle but internalizes, processing, integrating, laying down new structure. This is perhaps the deepest argument for rest, for stillness, for the deliberate choice to let the noise stop. The brain is not waiting passively in silence. It is building. It is growing toward itself, quietly and continuously, in the space between sounds. There is something quietly beautiful about the act of giving. When you extend kindness to another person, when you bring someone a meal, hold a door, offer a few words of genuine warmth, your brain does not simply register the action as neutral or selfless. It lights up the same reward centers that activate when you receive a gift yourself. The same pathways, the same warmth blooming in the same deep structures of the brain. Neuroscientists who study altruism have watched this happen in real time, watching the brain respond to generosity with something indistinguishable from gratitude. You are, in those moments, receiving something even as you give it. The kindness flows both ways at once, like a current running through a shared circuit. People who make a habit of small daily kindnesses report lower rates of depression, deeper social bonds, and a quiet resilience in the face of difficulty. The giving and the receiving are not opposites in the human nervous system. They are, it turns out, the very same thing. Rumi understood something about love that most of us spend lifetimes circling toward. He wrote not of romantic love as a transaction, not as a feeling one person has for another across a fixed distance, but as a force that dissolves the boundaries of the self entirely. In his poems, those wide, wheeling, breathtaking poems written in Persian 8 centuries ago, love is not an emotion so much as a gravitational field. It pulls the small, defended self into something larger. The ego softens. The walls we build around our inner lives begin, slowly, to come down. Rumi wrote from experience, from loss, from the death of his teacher Shamsi Tabrizi, which broke him open so completely that poetry poured out of him the way water pours from a cracked vessel. He had felt the self dissolve. He knew what lay on the other side of that dissolution. He called it union. He spent the rest of his life trying to describe it in language, and mostly he succeeded. Researchers once handed people warm cups of coffee and cold cups of iced tea, and then asked them to evaluate strangers. The people holding warm cups consistently judged the strangers as warmer, kinder, more trustworthy, more likable in every way. The physical sensation of warmth in the hand moved directly into the social perception of warmth in other people. This is not a metaphor. It is a literal neurological pathway. The same region of the brain that processes physical temperature also processes social warmth, and the two systems borrow freely from each other. When you feel physically cold, the world feels slightly more hostile. When your hands are warm, the people around you seem slightly more generous. This is part of why a cup of tea at the end of a long day feels like more than comfort. It is actually reshaping, in small but measurable ways, how the entire world looks to you in that moment. The Japanese have a phrase, mono no aware, which translates roughly as the pathos of things. The gentle, bittersweet sadness that arises from awareness of impermanence. It is the feeling you get watching cherry blossoms fall. It is the ache at the end of a perfect evening when you realize it is ending. It is not a heavy grief, but a tender one, tinged always with gratitude that the beautiful thing existed at all. Mono no aware is considered not a flaw in perception, but a deepening of it. A sign that you are paying real attention to the world. The Japanese aesthetic tradition is saturated with it. In the cracked tea bowl repaired with gold, in the raked gravel garden, in the autumn moon. These are not sad things. They are beautiful precisely because they will pass. The grief and the beauty are inseparable, wound together so tightly you could not extract one without destroying the other. This is, many believe, the truest form of attention. When you write by hand, when you form letters slowly with a pen on paper, pressing ink into a physical surface, your brain activates significantly more regions than when you type the same words on a keyboard. Handwriting engages motor circuits, visual processing, memory encoding, and language centers in a coordinated way that typing, however fast, does not replicate. Children who learn to write by hand develop stronger reading abilities and deeper memory for what they have written. Adults who take handwritten notes retain concepts more fully than those who type the same content word for word. There is something about the slowness of handwriting that forces the mind to process rather than merely transcribe. You cannot write as fast as you think, and in that gap, that slight friction between thought and page, something happens. Comprehension deepens. Language becomes more deliberate. The word on the page feels like it belongs to you in a way that typed text rarely does. Marcus Aurelius was one of the most powerful men in the world. He commanded the largest empire of his age. He waged wars, governed provinces, and made decisions that shaped the lives of millions. And at night, he sat alone and wrote to himself. A private journal of small meditations, reminders and self-corrections, never intended for any other eyes. He wrote things like, "Begin the morning by telling yourself you will meet difficult people today and resolve to be patient." He wrote, "The obstacle is the way." He wrote about impermanence, about not grasping, about treating every day as if it might be the last. Not with despair, but with wakefulness. He was talking to himself, working things out in the quiet, trying to become a better version of himself by writing down what he already knew but kept forgetting. Someone found these notes after his death. We call them the Meditations. They have not been out of print since. The human face at rest, when it is not performing, not signaling, not responding to social cues, defaults to an expression that reads as slightly sad. The corners of the mouth turn faintly downward. The eyes carry a softness that resembles grief. Researchers who study facial expression have noted this for years. The neutral human face, absent of any deliberate expression, tends to be rated by observers as mildly melancholy. We spend our waking social lives constantly performing emotions, lifting the corners of our mouths, brightening our eyes, adjusting our expressions to signal that we are fine, engaged, approachable, at ease. Happiness in many ways is an active performance. It requires effort and intention. When we let the face rest, the performance drops, and what remains is something older and quieter. Not sadness exactly, but the face of a creature that has known loss, that carries its history, that is simply for a moment not pretending to be anything at all. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry wrote The Little Prince in New York in 1942. While in exile from occupied France, he was grounded. His eyesight had deteriorated to the point where he could no longer fly the planes he loved. He was homesick in a way that had no cure, missing a France that might never return to what it had been. Out of that loneliness, that exile, that grief for a vanished world, he wrote a story about a small prince who falls from his tiny planet, travels between worlds, and meets a fox who teaches him that you become responsible for what you have tamed. The book is ostensibly for children. It is, of course, for everyone who has ever loved something and lost it. Saint-Exupéry disappeared 2 years later on a reconnaissance flight over the Mediterranean. The plane was never found. The Little Prince has since sold over 200 million copies. Studies measuring cortisol, the hormone most closely associated with stress, consistently find that it begins to decline within 20 minutes of being outdoors in a natural environment. Not after an hour, not after a long hike. Within 20 minutes of simply being outside, surrounded by trees, open sky, birdsong, the sound of wind in leaves, the body begins to let go of its chemical stress load. Blood pressure softens, muscle tension eases. The parasympathetic nervous system, the one responsible for rest and repair, begins to quietly take over. This is the reason parks exist inside cities. It is the reason hospitals with garden views see faster recovery rates. It is the reason a walk, however short, can change the entire texture of a difficult afternoon. Nature is not a luxury the body enjoys. It is an environment the body was built for, and returning to it, even briefly, feels like coming home to something the nervous system has been missing all along. We are drawn to certain visual arrangements as if by gravity. Symmetrical faces, the arc of a shoreline, the spiral of a nautilus shell, the proportions found in ancient Greek temples and Renaissance paintings, and the curve of a sunflower seed arrangement. Ratios that appear again and again across nature, across cultures, across the entire span of human art making. Beauty, it turns out, is not entirely in the eye of the beholder. There are patterns the human visual system is wired to respond to, and these patterns appear to be connected to signals of health, growth, and structural integrity in the natural world. We did not decide to find these things beautiful. The preference runs deeper than decision. It is woven into the architecture of how we see, which means that when you stand in front of a painting and feel something catch in your chest, you are not imagining it. You are your entire evolutionary history responding to form. Epictetus was born a slave. He learned philosophy while enslaved, and he took from it a single essential lesson that he spent the rest of his life teaching. We suffer not from the events of our lives, but from our judgments about those events. The thing that happens is neutral. What we tell ourselves about the thing, that it is unfair, that it is permanent, that it means we are ruined, that is where the suffering lives. This is not a call to emotional suppression or forced cheerfulness. Epictetus knew genuine hardship. His response was to say that the self does not have to be defeated by what happens to it. That understanding was, for him, the only freedom that could not be taken away. There is something in it worth carrying into sleep tonight. The idea that much of what weighs on the mind is not the world itself, but the argument you are having with the world. And the argument can always be put down. Rain has a sound. You already know this, not just intellectually, but in your body. The soft percussion of drops on glass, the white noise of a steady downpour, the smell that arrives just before it begins, that mineral, earthy scent called petrichor, which is the smell of soil releasing oils into the air in response to moisture. And your nervous system knows this sound in a very particular way, as a signal that it is safe to rest. Rain is associated with staying in, with shelter, with the natural end of activity. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for calm and recovery, in ways that researchers have been documenting for years. People fall asleep faster listening to rain. They report feeling safer. The ancient part of the brain that monitors for threat quiets down, reassured by the sound of water, and something in the chest loosens that you did not even realize had been held tight. Seneca wrote, near the end of his life, "It is not that we have too little time. It is that we waste so much of it." He was writing from experience. He was a man who had spent years in the court of Nero, who had squandered decades in political survival, in flattery, in the exhausting business of not being executed. He came to philosophy late, or later than he wished, and what it gave him was a clear-eyed view of where the hours actually went. Not to enemies or illness or bad luck, to busyness that led nowhere, to tasks that did not matter, to the slow hemorrhage of days spent doing things he would later wish he had not. He wrote about this with remarkable gentleness, as if grief had already moved through him, and what remained was just the clarity. He did not say, "Start over." He said, "Notice." Notice where the hours go. Then decide each day whether they are going somewhere you would choose. Scientists have measured what happens in the brain when someone holds another person's hand during a moment of physical pain. In scanner studies, participants who were told they would receive a mild electric shock showed significantly reduced neural activity in pain-processing regions when they were holding a hand, any hand, even a stranger's, compared to when they were alone. The hand did not change the stimulus. The shock was identical. What the hand changed was the interpretation. The brain, sensing connection, recalibrated its threat response. It told itself, somewhere below language, "You are not alone in this." And that telling, that quiet neurological reassurance, reduced the experience of pain in ways that could be seen and measured. We evolved in groups. Isolation is a stress state the body takes very seriously, and the presence of another hand, warm in yours, is a very old signal that the danger is shared and therefore survivable. Pablo Neruda wrote about lemons and bread and rain and the smell of wood the way other poets write about the divine. With total devotion, with the sense that the physical world is itself the sacred text, and that to describe a tomato accurately is an act of worship. Readers of his poetry frequently report something unusual: physical sensations, a warmth in the chest, a change in breathing, the feeling of being outside or near water, or of tasting something sweet, even sitting still in a quiet room. This is not coincidence. Neruda wrote in dense sensory language, engaging the brain's embodied simulation systems, which do not sharply distinguish between reading a vivid description and having the experience itself. The brain, encountering his lines, begins to simulate the sensation. The body follows the brain's lead. Poetry, in his hands, was not a description of experience. It was the delivery mechanism for it, arriving through the language rather than the world. The boundary between a vivid memory and a vivid imagination is, in the brain, surprisingly thin. Studies of memory recall and mental imagery show that the same neural structures activate in both cases. The same hippocampal networks, the same sensory simulation systems, the same emotional tagging. The brain does not have a clearly labeled compartment for real versus imagined. It stores both with similar neural signatures and under the right conditions. Extreme vividness, emotional weight, repetition. An imagined event can acquire all the texture of memory. This is why visualization works. The brain rehearses an imagined future event with real neural preparation, and the body arrives at that future slightly more ready, slightly more familiar, as though it has already been there once before. What does this mean as you lie here tonight? It means the peaceful scenes you allow yourself to inhabit as you drift towards sleep. The imagined meadow, the remembered coast, the soft room in some house that felt entirely safe. These are not distractions from reality. They are reality, registered by your nervous system as fully as anything that happens with your eyes open. Khalil Gibran wrote The Prophet over years in New York, far from Lebanon where he was born, shaped by exile and longing, and the memory of a landscape he feared he would never see again. He submitted the manuscript to publishers repeatedly and was rejected. The book was too strange, too poetic, too unlike anything in the market. He kept writing. He kept revising. Finally published in 1923, it sold modestly at first, and then slowly, steadily, without fanfare, it spread. By the time Gibran died in 1931, it was already becoming one of the best-selling poetry books in the world. Since then, it has sold over 11 million copies. It has never been out of print in over a century. The book speaks about love and children and work and death in a voice so quiet and sure that generations of readers have felt each time that it was written directly to them, which is, of course, the only way anything true ever arrives. Something changes in the body when forgiveness happens. Not the performance of forgiveness, not the forced recitation of words, but the actual releasing of a grievance held long in the chest. Studies measuring blood pressure before and during the process of genuine forgiveness find that the numbers drop. Heart rate steadies, the shoulders drop, the face softens. Researchers who study the physiology of forgiveness describe it as similar to the body releasing a sustained muscular contraction it had forgotten it was holding. The forgiven person does not have to be present. They do not have to deserve it. The body does not release its tension in exchange for fairness. It releases it in exchange for freedom. You are not, when you forgive, excusing what was done. You are choosing to set down a weight you have been carrying, and the body, which has been braced for the continuation of pain, is allowed at last to rest. There are themes that return to us throughout a life, questions we thought we had answered that come back changed, wearing a different face. The child who needed to understand whether the world was safe becomes the adult, wondering whether a new place, a new relationship, a new beginning can be trusted. The teenager asking, "Who am I?" becomes the middle-aged person asking, "Who have I become?" And then the elder asking, "Who was I all along?" We return to the same territory. We cannot seem to leave it. Psychologists describe this as the continuation of developmental tasks across the lifespan. The same essential questions revisited at each new stage, re-examined in light of more experience. It is not failure to circle back. It is the shape of a human life, not a straight line from ignorance to resolution, but a wide spiral, passing the same landscapes again and again, seeing each time something new. Hermann Hesse believed, and wrote throughout his long life, that every human life was fundamentally a journey toward itself. Not toward an external destination, not toward success or love or enlightenment as something separate from the person seeking it, but toward the truth of what was already there, buried perhaps under years of expectation and performance and the accumulated weight of who we were told to be. In Siddhartha, in Steppenwolf, in Demian, his characters move through disillusionment, through dissolution, through the painful shedding of false selves, always arriving, if they arrive anywhere, at something quieter and more native than what they began with. Hesse himself went through breakdowns, through years of despair, through the collapse of everything he had built, and wrote about it with honesty so complete it reads less like fiction than like testimony. The self, he said, was not something you discovered. It was something you remembered. When you slow your breathing, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, for just 5 minutes, the nervous system begins to shift. Heart rate variability increases, which is a marker of nervous system flexibility and resilience. The vagus nerve, which runs from the brainstem down through the heart and lungs and gut, carries the signal downward, slow. The body receives that signal in every organ simultaneously. Cortisol levels begin to drop. Muscle tension releases. The prefrontal cortex, which handles rational thought and long-range planning, regains some of the access it loses under stress. 5 minutes, not an hour of meditation, not a retreat in the mountains. The body is astonishingly responsive to this one simple intervention, as if it has been waiting for permission to settle, and the slow breath is the permission. The exhale especially. The exhale is the body's release valve. Each one is a small act of trust that the next breath will come. The Japanese concept of ikigai, roughly a reason for being, describes the thing that makes getting up in the morning feel like beginning rather than continuing a burden. It sits at the intersection of what you love, what you are good at, what the world needs, and what can sustain you. Not every person can place all four in perfect alignment, but the concept offers something valuable, even as an ideal. The idea that there is a reason particular to you, a kind of living that would feel right in a way that other ways of living do not. People with a strong sense of ikigai show measurably better health outcomes in longitudinal studies. Lower rates of cardiovascular disease, longer lives, faster recovery from illness. The body, it seems, knows when there is something worth waking for and responds to that knowledge at the cellular level. Purpose is not an abstraction. It registers in the blood. We are, as far as we know, the only species on this planet that tells stories about a future that has not yet happened. Every other animal lives with awareness of the present and some memory of the past. We do something stranger and more remarkable. We construct entire vivid narratives about events that exist nowhere yet. We plan, we hope, we worry, we imagine, sometimes in such detail that the imagined future carries the emotional weight of something already lived. This ability to mentally time travel is one of the most extraordinary features of human consciousness. It allows us to prepare, to create, to transmit wisdom across generations, to build civilizations across centuries. It is also the source of considerable suffering, because the future we imagine is often threatening, and the nervous system does not always distinguish between an imagined threat and a real one. Still, the gift outweighs the burden. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, that same astonishing capacity can be turned gently toward quiet things, toward what is already here, toward the breath which is happening now, the warmth which is here now, the rest which is already beginning. Sleep is the oldest form of trust the body knows. Before every night of your life, you have made the same ancient agreement to release consciousness, to let the muscles go limp, to allow the eyes to close on a world that is still present, still uncertain, still full of things that could go wrong. You cannot protect yourself while you sleep. You cannot watch. And yet every single night, the body releases into it anyway. Breathing slower, heartbeat settling, the intricate alarm systems of the waking mind stepping quietly aside. Ancient humans did this around fires, in trees, in small sheltered groups, trusting the darkness the way you trust a close friend. The body has not forgotten any of that. It still does the same thing, in the same way, through every difficulty and uncertainty your life contains. Tonight, as every night before it, you are choosing, without having to decide, to trust. And the body knows exactly what to do. Right now, as you listen to this voice, this slow, quiet voice settling into the room around you, something is happening in your brain that neuroscientists have measured and documented. When you listen to a calm, steady voice for long enough, your brainwaves begin to synchronize with the speaker's patterns, not metaphorically, not approximately. The neural oscillations in your brain begin to align themselves to the rhythm of the voice you are hearing. This is called neural coupling, and it is the mechanism by which one mind reaches through sound into another. Stories work because of this. Music works because of this. A voice in a quiet room speaking slowly, drawing each word out gently. It reaches into the body's electrical patterns and invites them, without force, to soften, to slow, to find the rhythm of rest. You do not have to try to relax, you only have to listen. The listening does the rest. And that is where we will leave it tonight. 100 facts about human nature, each one a quiet reminder of how extraordinary our world truly is. Thank you for spending this time with us here on Napflix. If you enjoyed tonight's journey, consider subscribing so you never miss a new video. Until next time, sleep well, dream deeply, and we will see you again very soon. Good night.